I'm Matthew Barney, director of Xanadu, and yes, I am a hermaphrodite. What you are about to see is a re-upload from a 2015 video that I performed the audio commentary on, and it is featuring the Windows 95 video tutorial guide starring Jennifer Aniston and that lovable BG Matthew Perry. Now, I don't remember much about this. I was involved in the production of the actual video in question somehow, but exactly how and to what degree I was involved, I do not remember. So, without further ado, here is the Windows 95 tutorial guide, re-uploaded in its full, uncut length, never before seen director's cut commentary. Thank you. Hello, I'm Matthew Barney, and welcome to the director's audio commentary of another one of my lost films. This one is entitled the Windows 95 Video Guide Tutorial. Now, unlike Hard Hat Harry, which I am not proud of, I am in fact quite proud of the work I did with Jennifer Aniston and the lead singer of the Bee Gees, Matthew Perry. But, unfortunately, there were producers involved, and these people were far more powerful than even those at PBS. And as you can see, this is a triptych. It is split into 3 parts: the cyber sitcom, 25 questions, and tips and tricks, which you'll all see here in the video commentary. Now, I remember we initially started filming this in 1994. It was late 94. The October sky had come in. Dagon and Cthulhu were high in the sky, and Yog-Sothoth was low. And people, well, let's just say that their patience was waning with the operating system we all used at the time, unless you were a Mac user. And that operating system was Windows 3X. Don't get me wrong, great operating system. But unfortunately, you can only do so much with so little, which is why movies like Hard Hat Harry exist. So, we got Jennifer Aniston and Matthew Perry, famous singer from the Bee Gees, and we got them together to do this little kind of sitcom thing that I thought would be really fun. And my initial cut of it featured people dressed completely in bondage gear and wearing rabbit faces. I was actually told by Steve Wozniak that we could not do that. I'm not sure why Steve Wozniak was there, because he's involved with Apple, and this is clearly Microsoft, who, as you may or may not know, simpleton, you simple little one-minded beaver, that they are 2 warring companies, 2 warring fractions. But you see, I'm so rich and so powerful, and I manage my money just so much better than you, that I use a computer with an operating system you've never even heard of. I mean, I'm sure that one of you in the comments is going to say something like, oh, Matthew's a Linux user. No, it's an operating system you've never heard of. It costs $4,000. And that's just for the base code. But that's okay. So, here we have Matthew Perry and Jennifer Aniston, who is now married to Brad Pitt, walking through. I built this set. Well, I didn't build it. I designed it. I put it down on paper, and I said to the construction guy, I want this, and he said, yeah, we can do that. We can do anything. He said, in construction work, and I said, please don't remind me of construction work. He goes, well, but in construction work we don't make mistakes. We just have happy little accidents. And those accidents oftentimes result in lawsuits, because accidents usually involve the death of a construction worker who may or may not have volunteered his life to be taken on screen for a Matthew Barney film. Now there you can see on the left, that's actually Hillary Clinton before she met Bill, and that right there is Bjork when she was only 13 years old. That's right. Of course, she's being dubbed. That great Wayne Gretzky, he was big in the 90s. I mean, and of course, Matthew Perry from the Bee Gees just looking so young and fresh in 1994. I mean, nowadays he's doing well, but you know, we've lost too many Bee Gees over the years. And music has taken a sharp decline in quality. And these three, one of them is now the most powerful woman in the world. One of them is pursuing me with paramilitary groups. And the other one, you know, is a former member of a disco band from the 1970s. And that's okay. Now, as you know, this is a video guide, a tutorial, if you like. And as I've stated time and again, I don't like my movies to be released on home video. So I was rather adamant that we screen this publicly. I did come to what I thought was a reasonable compromise when I met with the head of Microsoft, and I asked him, listen, I know a lot of people use Microsoft Windows, and that's fantastic. I mean, I'm so much richer than you, Bill. I mean, you were just so below me, you don't even understand, intellectually and monetarily. But here, let me make a deal with you. If you don't release this on home video, and instead release it in select theaters nationwide, my goodness, the neighbors are rowdy in this studio, but that's okay. Anyway, I said, Bill, if you don't mind, well, you know how I feel about home video. I don't like it. I think it's a gimmick. I don't think it'll last, and unfortunately, it has lasted. It's persisted very well over the years, and I don't really care because I'm still not gonna, you know, indulge in it. So I said, Bill, why don't we release it in exactly 707 theaters nationwide across America? And they'll be in remote regions, and these will only be art house theaters. And anyone who truly wants Microsoft Windows 95 will get in their cars and their Bentleys, and they will drive their Bentleys to the cinema, where they can learn how to use Excel and the start menu and how to turn the computer on and turn it off. And Bill looked at me, and then he tapped his pen on his desk kind of indifferently, and he said words that remain scorched into my mind to this day. And he said, Matt, are you fucking crazy? And I said, no, Bill, everyone else around me is crazy. I am the only sane one. That's why Yog Sothoth chose me to deliver the message of art across the multiverse, because not only is Yog Sothoth existent across the multiverse, he is the embodiment of it. And Bill, soon after that, I mean, we had wrapped production, and he fired me, and we hired whoever is credited on this to do some reshoots, and it was released on video home system after that. So I'm not too happy about that. But, I mean, the initial product, I have the director's cut sitting around here somewhere in my extravagant chambers. But I'm not going to show it to you because you don't deserve to see it, because you're poor. And you know how I feel about you. You're the filth of the earth, but the world needs ditch diggers, and that's okay. Those ergonomic keyboards, they were really popular at the time. I remember I had 6 of them. I went into a, what was the name of that store? Well, I suppose it doesn't matter. But I went into one the day those ergonomic keyboards came out, and I bought all of them before the poor people standing in line could get them as gifts for their, you know, family members for Christmas, the pagan feast of Saturnalia. Now, I don't remember, is that actually Hillary Clinton? I know I have worked with her before. No, this is a redhead. I apologize. That's not Hillary Clinton. I know Hill Dog when I see her, but I didn't get a very good night's sleep last night, and that's okay. I drank a little too much gourmet coffee. I have a coffee closet inside my shoe closet, which in turn is inside my hat rack. And you may be asking yourself, Matt, you're so smart and funny, and you're so much more wealthy than I am, but I'm pretty sure that a closet can't fit inside a hat rack, and I'll just shake my head, nod my eye, give you a little wink, and I'll say, yeah, it can. You don't understand art. So there's the recycle bin. That was I was big into the first Earth Day. I was one of the founding members of Earth Day. Prior to Earth Day, you could just toss your beer cans in with, your rotting meat in the garbage. But then I came along and I obliterated all that. And I said, why are we tossing away perfectly good beer cans that, we can remake in our own image? Perhaps build a car that has human limbs sticking out of it and that are on fire, and as they drive down the highway they sing glorious odes to Azathoth. But and for once the committee agreed with me, and this wasn't even Microsoft, this was like 10 years before this, and they said, you're right, we can manipulate people. And I said, exactly, that's what it's about, that's what art is for. That's why when the car with human limbs instead of wheels is running at full pace down the highway, screaming, Azathoth, Azathoth, haha, Cthulhu, Fatagan Riley. And then you know that art is truly what the world needs to be whipped into shape and remolded in your image. Now, I don't know who that gentleman was. I do know that he sadly passed away in 2003. Probably something due to his unhealthy lifestyle. Now, if you've ever seen me, you know that I am in the greatest shape that any human being on this planet is in. And that man, like I said, we need ditch diggers and window washers. And we need the little people like you to make people like me feel a little more comfortable. And we only give you, 25%, well, I'm sorry, not percent, 25-cent pay raises every 3 years, because it gives you the illusion that you're in control. And, if we didn't do that, you would just rise up against us. And, that's not okay. Now, I didn't direct the sequences featuring Microsoft Word, because you can't really direct something that isn't there. I've tried, and I've only found myself in the city of the Dark Ones. And, they implanted some images in my mind with the tentacle of Chokru, and, I came back haunted. So that wasn't a very good experience when I tried to direct nothingness and manipulate reality itself on a level that was, I'm not going to say above me, because that wouldn't be true. I am Matthew Barney, I am the Supreme Being, but at the same time, there's just so much of me that I'm overwhelmed by myself sometimes, and that's okay. The Chinese menu, that I do remember, because we printed this when it was finished, and Bjork there, and the BG, or should I say the former BG, who, I don't know if you know this about Matthew Perry, but he transmogrified sometime in the mid-90s. It was right around after this, and he turned into another young man named Ben Affleck. And if you look closely, you can see the resemblance with the horribly stuck-up feathered hair and the underdeveloped chin. Oh dear, I hear helicopters. I certainly hope that's not what I think it is. Bjork is furious. A few weeks ago, when I recorded the Hard Hat Harry commentary, I went back to my extended stay in only to find that it had been raided. And me and little Bjork daughter that I made with Bjork, we fled in horror, because there were these men with megaphones and guns chasing us, shouting, "Matthew, Matthew, please, please put the girl down, Matthew. We only want to talk to you." But I know better. I know better than to listen to someone who spends their day covered in grease, cleaning guns and spitting into microphones. I know better. Now, that gentleman, I wish I could remember his name, but he was married to the ugly woman there. And they made several ugly children before his passing in 2003. And one of them, at least one of them, fathered you. And as you can see, both parents, the ugly elderly woman and the overweight man, both have a hair color that is a filthy shade of red. And that's why you and everyone like you is so incredibly intellectually bereft. It's because your parents just have red hair. Cro-Magnon minds. Now that's actually filmed right off a screen instead of using screen capture software, which was kind of new at the time. Floppy disks, another obsolete technology that I still use because I'm so incredibly drawn to the past. I drink Pabst Blue Ribbon. That accent that heavy man was putting on, I found it incredibly offensive. But the gentleman and I concurred when he said, "I'm not trying to use the vaguely Polish, vaguely Italian accent in an offensive manner. I'm trying to be ironic. I'm saying, no, not all window washers are of an indeterminable ethnicity. Just as long as you understand that, then maybe, he won't get together with the elderly redhead and make you, dear listener. But that's okay. I'm not sure why we decided he was the savior at the end of this little digital sitcom. That seems like poor decision making in retrospect. But I knew what I was doing, and I still do. So even if a time portal opens up right now, and I step right through it and say, "Matt, don't do that," the younger Matt's going to look at me and say, "Matt, don't tell me what to do. I know what to do. I'm Matthew Barney." And then I'll say, "You know what, Matt? You're right. I agree with me." Now, obviously, this fellow in the glasses he's we're poking a little fun at Bill Gates, because Bill Gates wears glasses and has that big poofy 6th grader haircut. And that's okay. He wears the bad tchotchke pants and the horribly mismatched shirt with an even more mismatched tie. And we can't decide if he has blonde hair or brown. And as you can hear, his voice is nasally and high-pitched like a nerd. Or what you beavers, my little beaver peons, call a nerd. Which is, if you're racist, you're probably a liquored-up hillbilly with a shotgun sitting on your front porch, trying to watch this on your CRT television, wondering why the old boob tube isn't giving you HBO no more. And that's because, you just don't understand how the modern world works. We don't use cathode ray tubes anymore because they're bad for the environment. And that's why I started Earth Day. Earth Day was my sole creation. Unfortunately, Ted Turner took credit for it. And later he went on and created a television show that I had written. And I may do a commentary of it in the near future, I don't know. But the show eventually became called Captain Planet and the Planeteers. And my idea was that a big naked blue guy with seemingly omnipotent powers was followed around by 5 pubescent peoples, that is to say teenagers, if I'm translating for lesser beings like you, who can't comprehend my incredibly high level of language. Even now, I hear them speaking to me. And they say, "Matthew, you do so well. We love you for talking. For talking. I spaced out, as dreamers often do. The photos, yes. Now, like I said, I use an operating system that is so incredibly advanced that right there, that clown, that Chinese dragon riding the bicycle down the hallway with the smoke, that's all me. That's not me riding, of course, but that is one of the things that actually made it into production. I could have sworn we set the man on fire. But, because look at him. He would not stop acting like this. Even when I yelled cut, he still had that crazy, I'm, Matthew McConaughey look in my eye. See, now, that wasn't the line that was written. The line that was written was, "Peons of the world, come together and listen unto me, for I am Matthew Barney, and I will show you the way of how to use Windows 95. I know you don't understand, and even when we're through, you still won't, because my eloquence is so incredibly vast, and my advanced techniques are infinite, and you can't even begin to touch or grasp my greatness without fumbling in ignorance. And that's okay. That's the Chinese symbol for fertility that he's wearing on his red bandana, written in gold lettering. And the dragons, of course, are a phallic symbol. That's all my influence, the left side of the brain, right side of the brain. I like to talk about that a lot. Let's talk about that a little. See, I believe everyone can be divided into 4 subtypes of humanity. And those subtypes, of course, are earth, fire, water, and air. And the reason we can be divided into those 4 subtypes is because those are the elements, and there are only 4 of them. Now, I know, you're going to argue, and you're going to bring string theory into it, because you think you're so smart. And you're going to say, "But Matthew, string theory dictates that there are at least 17 different elements and dimensions simultaneously existing within a 4-sided cube." And to that I would respond, "Commoner, oh commoner, look not unto me. Look unto Dagon. Dagon, who helps those who sacrifice those in the name of Mu." And you'll probably be feeling kind of confused, maybe a bit gassy, maybe even fatigued. And that's okay. I was too at first. But just remember that no matter how hard you work, no matter how many hours you put in at Burger King or whatever little horrible mom and pop shop you work at, you'll never, ever be as good as me. No one can surpass me. I have risen to the highest zenith from the lowest nadir, and that is why I make movies like the Cremaster Cycle films, because you cannot even begin to comprehend them. You see, they have this theory that human beings only use between 3 and 5, 10 tops % of the brain. I am using 196% of my brain. Now, you're saying, "Matthew, please, tell us, we low, tiny beavers, building our dams as busybodies throughout the day. Tell us how you can be using 196 when there is only 100 in a whole." And I will say, it's because, dear commoner, dear beaver, my little beaver, that's what you are, my little beaver. I will say, it's because I have 2 brains. I was born superior. I was born literally with a silver spoon in my mouth. The doctors had to grab it and try to pull it away from me, but I said no. I was born rich. I was born privileged and entitled. And oh dear goodness, you know what, the neighbors... I'm sorry, the last time I recorded this, we were in a fairly high-quality studio. This time we're in the inner city. I was giving a lecture at a local middle school about how great I am. And before they threw me out and threatened to call the Detroit Police Department, I decided to stop at a local Kinko's where I am recording this right now. So the fellow with the Chinese symbol and the frosted hair is still here, and he's showing us a little bit about desktop themes, something that sadly has kind of faded from the GUI of most operating systems in recent years. This kid, this is actually my first son from another marriage. I was married prior to taking my child bride on the set of Hard Hat Harry Real Life Giant Construction Equipment for Kids. And this boy here in the tie-dye, I've disowned him. And because he said to me, he said, Dad, well, he didn't say Dad, because every time he called me Dad, I smacked him and I said, call me Matthew. There's no such thing as titles. I said, unless you're Matthew Barney. And I said, you are the son of Matthew Barney. Act like it. And that was when he made some phone calls, and a man and a woman in suits showed up at the door. And he went with them, and they gave me these papers and documents and waivers, all sorts of things I just did not understand. That they told me that if I did not sign it, I would no longer be Matthew Barney. And I felt intimidated, but looking back, I realized that when I chopped them up and buried them in the woods, that, I got away with it, because, I made it into a movie. A movie that is now known as Drawing Restraint 9. And if you look very closely in the scene at the Shinto temple, you can see me far in the background on a moonlit hill, shoveling, throwing limb after limb of social worker into their shallow graves. And that's okay. Pinball was always fun. Especially if you had those gloves that I don't want to call them power gloves. But my boy there, who's no longer my son, had them. I believe he called them power gloves. They were some sort of preventive measure to avoid carpal tunneling. Now that mirror, of course, is of my design. In real life, a mirror like that would serve absolutely no purpose. And that's why I put it on the helmet. Because I was trying to kill little Matthew Jr. I mean, I was hoping Matthew Jr. would always be looking behind him when he rode a skateboard. Again, initially that was going to be a bag of cocaine, but they made me change it. And I said, well, you know what, that's alright. This is, after all, a movie about computers, so why don't we have the disc contain secrets that, these people are going to sell to the Russians. And Bill, of course, being Bill, said, Matt, it's 1994, the Cold War has been over for 3 years now. And I said, well, we could make this a period piece. And he said, honestly, Matthew, I don't know where you're coming from with this, because we're making a video tutorial on how to use Windows 95. The key words or key numbers being the numbers 9 and 5 together as one, forming 95, which is 101% less of the brain usage I output every day. The 4% of the 200% of my brain that I don't use, the 4% I don't use, is actually just dedicated to some stuff that I have on the background. I can freely access that at any time. And I see the world like that every day. In fact, there may be a scene coming up here afterwards, I forget, where they escape, but in reality, I used the dark powers of Riley to trap them there, Photogen, and that is, the computer was then smashed down, and it was, the dimensions were unlike anything you would ever seen, because so small, yet, that 300-pound man was in there, that 300-pound man who's your father. They were squeezed out of this reality and into another one where they came out slightly more pretty. Not nearly as pretty as me, but that's okay. They, unfortunately still ended up fathering you. So now we come into the second part of the triptych. I mean, we're just reviewing here, but we're about to enter the second arc of the triptych. And everything, see Bill's PC, little inside joke, because it was Bill's actual test machine for Windows 95. Recycle bin, we've talked about that. The Microsoft network, I no longer believe that's functioning, which is a little bit sad. I haven't heard from it in a long time. So, as you can tell, this part of the feature I did not direct. I initially envisioned a 6-hour film with 2 20-minute intermissions, and it would only be featured in one art house in America, in northern Kansas, where, and it would be in the dead of winter, and I wanted there to be snow blocking the way to the parking lot, to the entrance of the theater, because I really wanted people to work to see this. And every time I do hold a private screening of my extended unrated director's cut of this video guide to Windows 95, it is in the dead of winter. I look ahead. I turn, to page 282, page 282 of the Black Feast section of the Necronomicon Gates, and I make sure that it's going to be a heavy winter, a thick winter, just a good winter, and I offer, all the peons who drive those snow plows, I tell them, put all the snow you find around this building. I want you to make it as hard to get into this atrium as it can be for anyone, and heaven forbid that there is, one of those open-air windows, those sunlight windows. And don't get me wrong, those are important. Those are very important. But, it's winter. And so what I do is, once all the snow is barricaded around the theater, I wait until about 2 in the morning. And that's when, in the middle of suburbia, this one building lights up. Neon lights shooting into the sky, spotlights crisscrossing, and Roman candles exploding like stars across the night. And then, as loud as it can, from all sorts of megaphones surrounding the building, again, dead quiet in the middle of suburbia, a very sleepy district here, in this quiet little town in Kansas, where it snows a lot, more than you'd think. I start screaming into the microphone. Well, I don't scream because I don't like to raise my voice. But in the microphone, I just talk in this tone of voice. But it's so loud. It's about 800 decibels, which, if you're familiar with sound measurement, which I know you're not because, you live a life, counting up receipts. But if you were familiar with these measurements, you'd know that 800 decibels is about 600 times louder than a jet engine taking off. So my voice, even as quiet as it is now, at 2 a.m. in the middle of suburbia, from as many megaphones as I can line up, I yell, "Come one, come all. Come see the show. Come see the director's cut of the Windows 95 video guide tutorial, directed by me, Matthew Barney." And it just gives me such wonder to hear the people groan as they leap out of their beds and they say, "What? A Matthew Barney exhibit is playing here? In our backwater town? In the middle of winter, I was so bored before that. But now I'm not. And then they rush to the building only to find it covered in a thick layer of snow. And now that it's 2 a.m. and the blizzard has settled in full and is showing no signs of stopping, they realize they have to claw their way in with their bare hands. They can't even use gloves because the snow is so sharp and the soft gloves just prevent them from swimming through the snow. And if they're lucky enough to get in, I only charge them $9,000 admission. And if they don't have that kind of money on them, well, then it's into the oven with them. Just like Hansel and Gretel. I have this really, really cute oven. If you've ever seen Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, it's kind of like that, the opening scene. I bake cookies in it, cookies made out of recycled human feces. And I threaten the people who make it in and don't have the admission fee. I say, you can end up like the witch at the end of Hansel and Gretel. Or you can, become my slave. And usually they choose the latter option, the slavery option. And I don't like to call it slavery, because slavery is a bad word, and I live in a new, hypersensitive, liberal era where it's not okay to say that word, the S word. And that's okay. In fact, I agree with that rule. You know why? Because I wrote it. And so what I do is I pay them a lump sum, usually between 10 and 12 cents. 12 cents is only if I'm feeling very generous. I really have to like this new indentured servant that has come into my life. Every now and then, though, someone who does make it in through the snow barrier in the middle of a blizzard in February in Kansas makes it in, and they have a credit card, and they are actually willing to spend $9,000. I mean, it's only $9,000. That's nothing to me. I wipe myself with $9,000, and I've actually constructed a scrunchie out of $100 bills that I use in the shower every morning to exfoliate my skin with products that you've never heard of, because they're made out of whale oil extract and the tears of baby seals, and that's how I keep my epidermis so clean. Is I use the emotional power of just unfathomable terror to rinse the filth of lesser beavers like you off of me. I remember that term, the information superhighway. I knew a man who might have been a woman, who might not have had any determinable gender at all, now that I think about it. Well, let's just say that this person always referred to MSN, the Microsoft Network, as the information superhighway. And he, she, or it did not recognize that outside of your email there exists an entire internet to explore. Now granted, it was 1995 and there wasn't much internet to explore. And that was okay for a time. I was glad that filthy beavers like you couldn't just download my masterpiece, the Cremaster Cycle. Cycles 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but not in that order. You don't even know what order to watch them in, and I'm never going to tell you. One time David Lynch walked up to me on the street. David Lynch, he's a fantastic being. He's got a real energy about him. And he looked me in the eye and he said, "Are you Matthew Barney?" And I said, "Yes. Yes, I am. You're David Lynch, aren't you? Director of, Eraserhead and Inland Empire, Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway, Blue Velvet." He said, "Yes. Oh, I see you're familiar with my work, Mr. Barney." I said, "Yes, Mr. Lynch, I am, and before I could finish, he said, "Even by my standards, you're pretty fucking weird." And then he just walked on. And I was left there, taken aback, and I almost felt something close to sadness. But then I remembered who I was. I was married to Bjork at the time, that this happened, because, we were walking together hand in hand. Well, actually, it wasn't hand in hand. I had one of those Johnny jump-ups around my chest, and she was kind of hanging on to me in the front walking. Johnny Jump Up, it's that kind of harness. I'm sure you've seen the lowbrow comedy mainstream film The Hangover. Well, in that film, the heavyset fellow with the beard, I believe they call people of his demeanorisms a bear. Well, that fellow, I think his first name is Zakaya. Well, Zakaya has one of those, and he's carrying an infant around the whole movie. Well, I had a similar device strapped around my chest, and Bjork was already 17 years old. And, she had grown quite a bit from the time we had worked on Hard Hat Harry real-life construction equipment for kids. And, but that's okay, because, she was now about 4'11". But because I'm so tall and I can change my height at will, that really didn't matter. And I must have somehow skeeved out David Lynch, which really means a lot to me. Like, that is an extreme achievement in my life. If I were playing a video game, a little blurb would blip at the bottom middle of the screen, and it would say, "Whoop, achievement unlocked. You skeeved out David Lynch, king of skeeves." And I felt this sense of mirth. Absolute mirth, and it ran through my body, and that's what happened with David Lynch. So this part is called moving the taskbar, and a lot of people really had a hard time with this, and as you can see, nobody does this anymore. Nobody puts the desktop themes. We began moving quite quickly here. Desktop themes were very important to a lot of people, and you could save them. I designed that. Well, no, actually, I didn't design that one. The pink one, Bjork designed that. And she said, Mister, look what I did with the desktop themes. And I said, oh, that's fantastic, Bjork. Why aren't you in the kitchen? The closet in the kitchen. I could have sworn I padlocked it and everything. I had a combination code on it. Someone during the course of the production of this must have realized what the code was and let her out, and she was speaking not when spoken to. And I run a tight house, and I don't tolerate that kind of crap. So now we're at video and audio support, and I think Windows 95 had an amazing look. Like, this is all my editing right here. Of course, what we did take out were the flashing strobe lights, because initial test viewers had severe seizures when watching this. I mean, not that I care. I mean, they were peons, and the little beavers just rolled onto the ground and started foaming at the mouth. But I don't mind, because they weren't me. So now we are at the Q&A section. And not a lot was required here. This was more or less me working with a computer, and I had not really done much with computers at the time, because in 1994, I couldn't tell you the difference between 486 or Pentium processor with 8 megabyte RAM or 386DX, and 4 megabyte RAM. See, as far as I know, less numbers could be more, like when I go out to the country club and I play a round of golf with myself. Now, if you look closely in the upper right-hand corner and slightly to the left, you'll see a face coming out of the clouds. That is done absolutely on purpose. It looks a bit like the half mask that Quasimodo wears in the infamous play, I'm not sure what the name of the play is, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. I think it's Pirates of Penzance. But Quasimodo wore that half-face mask to cover up his disfigurement in Pirates of Penzance. And we didn't need 32-bit programs to upgrade, because we had added power and an ease of use. And that's what made Windows 95 so great. And that's why I put Quasimodo up there in the clouds looking down on us. And there's a part in The Pirates of Penzance, which I actually directed a production of, a live production. It wasn't one of my exhibits. It was just something I did for fun on the side. And there is a part in that play, which even you, a filthy peasant beaver, may know, where a giant portrait of Queen Victoria comes down from the sky. And in my version, I had the disfigured hunchback wearing the mask covering the burns on his face, singing the song London After Midnight as he descended the giant framed portrait. And I think it worked out really well. And that was kind of a one-shot for me. And the college told me that if I ever set foot on their campus again, I would be shot on sight by people who had these electroshock, weapons. And then I would be taken to an undisclosed location in Nevada where my brain would be pried open and I would be studied and given to science. I'm not sure why they said all that. It was a very specific threat. And this was years before I got into filmmaking. This was the late 1970s. I was a young man of 18, 19. And even then, I was generating, controversy. And that's why you flex your creative muscles as early as you can. Because if you don't start the artistic bodybuilding process when you're young, you have to really, really work for it when you get older. So when I was a young lad, a munchkin of 17 or 18, I began flexing my creativity muscles. And I would get threatened a lot by the local police and social workers. I was taken to see a series of therapists. And most of these therapists have long since fallen off the face of the earth, citing that they have gone to live in the middle of the woods, far away from Western society, because they just don't understand the greatness of Matthew Barney, of me. Now, one of life's greatest questions is, can I stop monitoring system resources in Windows 95? And the answer is yes, because it improves your system resource limitations. Run many more applications. And, that's why we've got Quasimodo telling us to create more complex documents down from the sky, like Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria, who... I'm an educated man, but she was long before my time, long before the 640K barrier. And it doesn't rely on a real mode memory to remember that Queen Victoria was a bit of a stick in the mud. She would have taken something like my art and either really enjoyed it and said, let's make an MS-DOS game out of it, or she would have burnt me at the stake. And had she tried the latter, she would have known that she would have had to go through the elder god Yog-Sothoth to deal with me. So now we've got 620 to 630K of memory free. But will it be on both CD-ROM and floppy? Yes, it will. But because I'm so amazingly rich and so much more powerful than you, I use an operating system, and its name is not in a language you would recognize. Not even your peons' greatest scholar could translineate, because it's written in a cipher code from a language that is loosely an ascended form of Swahili. Now, Swahili is obviously a language you've never heard of because you're poor. Well, Swahili is the language of the ancient Phoenicians. And my operating system is coded in not numbers, but phrases. And you can imagine how incredibly large the disk is that I have to pop in if I want to reinstall my operating system. It's actually the size of a Laserdisc, but it is not in fact a Laserdisc. Now, I still watch films on Laserdisc because I can. I owned the very first Laserdisc player. In fact, I remember the day Laserdiscs were released to the general public. I sent out small Asian men on bicycles to collect as many of them as possible, because all I wanted to hear that day were the tears of the people who wanted to buy them from Circuit City. Now, you may be asking yourself, Matt, what is Circuit City? And I look down upon you and I say, look not upon me, but upon any page on the internet, and Google it. Or if, you're even lesser than a lesser being, do a Yahoo search. ScanDisk, a program that is still very important to me to this day. No, the answer to that question is no. Now, it says yes, but it's no. I argued for an hour with Bill Gates, and he actually called Steve Jobs, who was still alive at the time, and Steve Jobs came in, and we sat down, and we tried to levitate together, because we're both into that kind of stuff. And we sat there, and we hummed the mantra of, the transcendental meditation that I had learned from the book I swiped from David Lynch's back pocket as he walked away from me in disgust. And we sat there doing the mantras, going, Om, different directory, preserve your previous DOS Windows configuration, Om, allow dual boot of both versions, Om, MS-DOS, Om, MS-Fax, Om, accessories, Om, after setup control panel that remove programs, Om, MS-Fax again, Om, and put a check in the box, Home requires 10 megabytes of free space to install. Home shortcuts on the desktop. Home, there are 2 ways to do this. Home, right mouse click on desktop. Type command line. And we just did that for hours on end, and Bill Gates eventually just left, and I'm not sure why, and he came back hours later, and we were still there long into the night meditating on the computer, and he said, "Are you guys still here?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you want to join us in our meditation?" And he looked around and he sighed and shook his head and he said, "I'm going home. You guys just lock up the studio when you're done." So Steve Jobs and I continued to meditate. Home, C prompt, but you get the point. Now, starting and restarting the computer was always an issue with many people, because there was a time when, before you know to shut down your computer, it would go to a black screen and it would say, "This computer is now safe to turn off," and you would physically press the power button, something that hasn't been done in well over 10 years. And people struggled with this, and they struggled even more afterwards, because now they don't understand that you actually physically have to press the power button on an older computer. But I guess that's really the end of this story. See, Dominic Rossetti, he was the man brought in to replace me, and he met with a series of unfortunate accidents not long after this was released, widespread on video home system. Tony Mitchell I have worked with again. We worked with him on the Hoist segment of Districted. He's a good man. Now, as you can see, we have the credits here: Pamela Wiggins and Sweeney, who have appeared in all my films since this. Patricia Jenkins, who I've never worked with again due to her horribly racist nature. The fourth grip and the grip, we needed a series of grips, believe it or not. So many were called in, and so many kept falling into the eternal pit of fire of but that's okay. Oh, the colorist, Larry Wood, I think his name was, he was a good guy. I enjoyed working with him, and I brought him in on Cremaster 2. But there you have it, GT Interactive Software Corporation working hand in hand with the highest life form of all, Matthew Barney. That's me. And I want to thank everyone for taking an hour out of their busy day of ditch digging and paper pushing and pencil pondering to come watch with me a GT Interactive Software. So, to all the little people out there, the people who get up long before I do and clear the roads for me. Oh, this must have been one of those post-credit sequences. I don't remember shooting this. I believe that's Matthew Perry of the Bee Gees, and he's doing his little jazz routine. Because right after this, I remember his head cracked open and blood spurted out, and he gave birth to Ben Affleck. But what's even more interesting about that is, over the years, this fat man with a beard and glasses followed Ben around and collected skin follicles and dead particles of hair that would fall off of Ben. And I saw this man, many times with these little burnt offerings of Ben, and he was selling them to what I can only assume is a shady, North Korean corporation. And 6 months later, Justin Bieber came into the world, and we've had him ever since. So, in a way, you could say that the Bee Gees, the best disco band of the 1970s, inadvertently gave birth to Justin Bieber. And it is possible that at this very moment, as I speak these words, Justin Bieber is, spreading his legs and giving birth through his vagina. Thank you again for joining me, everyone. I'm Matthew Barney. I'll see you next time.